look at our passage that we've been looking at every week from Acts 28. As we've been in this Unhindered series, we've been talking about the vision of our church for the next 2 years. I'm so happy that you have joined us on this journey, kind of step by step, piece by piece, hearing about where God has taken us, where we are, but also where we're going. And we couldn't be more excited about it. And many of you are jumping in, you're praying different prayers, and you're praying not only for the church, but you're praying for God to increase your faith as well. And it's been really exciting to hear these stories. So let's do this. I want to pray for us, and then we're going to jump into God's word. Father, thank you for this time. We praise you. We love you. Lord, I pray that you would meet every need of every person in this room today. And that as you speak through your word, that you would open up hearts and minds. There are people in this room who need peace, God, need comfort. I pray that you would provide that. People here who need clarity and perspective. I pray that you would provide that. People who need to be challenged, Father, to move forward in their faith. I pray that you would provide that your truth, God, would speak to our hearts and transform us. I pray that the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart would be pleasing to you, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, you don't have to raise your hand, but I want you to think about this in your mind. Some of you on the spectrum of risk and courage are on the low end. Some of you would say that you're a risk assessor or you're risk averse, and maybe that's who you are. You know, you take caution in a lot of things that you do, and take a risk is kind of a hard thing for you to do. Others of you are people who I would call have risk appeal. You're risk takers. And you like the adventure of getting out there and doing things that are a little bit risky. Some of you, like me, would say, well, it just depends on what it is. Like, I generally enjoy to take risk and do, kind of adventurous things. But when it comes to certain things, I just don't want to do that. And one of those is food. So I'm very careful about food. We went on a mission trip this summer to Thailand. And I was partnered with Vince Batista, who went with us also. And Vince, as far as food is concerned, is on the other end of the scale. He's a risk taker. And so we're eating this different kind of food. And by the way, I've got a personal, lifelong record of never having food poisoning. So now the moment I say that, I'm going to probably get it this week. And I'm going to keep that streak alive for as long as possible. So I was very careful about what I ate and drank when we were in Thailand. But Vince had this disposition. It'll probably be okay. Oh, you can do that, but I'm not going to do it. So there's some areas of life where you can be more careful, right, and not take risks. There are other areas of life where you just have to take a risk. You're doing the risk-reward kind of analysis. You say, well, for this reward, I'm willing to take this risk. For instance, if you get on an airplane, you're taking a risk. Now, some of you, this is disconcerting to you as I'm reminding you of the risk of flying on an airplane. But that's nonetheless, some areas of life you have to take a risk. And here's what I want to say. When it comes to faith, you have to take risks. It's just the nature of faith. The nature of Christianity is that it compels us and requires us to have a level of courage to move forward in our faith. And so what I want to talk to you about today is this whole idea of unhindered courage. And for you to get in your heart and in your mind this idea of what is my best next step that might require some form of risk on my part, but the reward is worth it. And so we look at the Apostle Paul, and we see Paul there in prison in Rome, as we've been looking at for these 4 weeks now. We see the Apostle Paul, who is there. He's in chains. He's got a Roman centurion by him. He's been through trials. He's been on long journeys. He's been through this whole process of being under arrest now. And now he is in Rome awaiting his trial before the emperor. And yet, Paul had boldness and courage. Let's look at the passage here. We've looked at it every week. It says this about Paul: he lived there 2 whole years at his own expense. Now, remember again, he's under house arrest, and he has a measure of freedom, but he is basically renting this house by his own resources, and he is welcoming people to him and proclaiming the gospel. This is what it says. And he welcomed all who came to him, proclaiming the kingdom of God and teaching about the Lord Jesus Christ with all boldness and without hindrance. Now, you would look at Paul and you would say, well, he's hindered. Paul didn't see it like that. He thought about where he was in his life, and yet instead of kind of hunkering down and closing down. He looked for opportunities to expand the gospel and to increase his faith. And it took, of course, an amount of courage to do that. And we look at people like the Apostle Paul and we say, man, look at his courage. But I want to remind you today that the capacity for courage, now it may not be applied in the same way, of course not, but the capacity of courage in the Apostle Paul, as well as for all those people in the scripture that we would call heroes of our faith, that we're going to look at in just a moment, that same capacity for faith and courage has potential within each and every one of us. So, we look at this part of the passage. It says, with all boldness. Biblically, what does that mean? Well, the word means without concealment, free and fearless confidence, cheerful courage, assurance. And it sounds like a place called home. It sounds like what we would want for our lives, right? Most of us would say, well, that sounds pretty good. That as I think about the reward of my faith growing and increasing, that I would be willing to take the risk in order to see that come about. But the big question for us is, where does this courage come from? Where does this kind of courage come from? Well, let's look at it. And this is where we want to look at Hebrews 11. Hebrews chapter 11, which is known as the chapter in the Bible that describes faith and illustrates faith. It's the hall of faith because it lists many, many heroes of faith that we would look at and say, man, they had great, great courage. But the same type of courage and confidence that we're looking at here is also available for each one of us. Where does it come from? Where does such courage come from? Here's the first part of it, okay? By knowing faith, by understanding, first of all, what faith is. We've got to define faith properly because that's where it all begins. Knowing what faith is, defining it, and understanding it. Because I think faith is one of those words that we throw around in church circles that maybe we don't quite understand really what it's all about. I heard a story about a kindergartner who came home from the first day of school. And he's sitting at the table, the dinner table with his family. They're eating dinner that night, and he blurts out, 2 + 2 = 4. And his dad goes, oh my goodness, we have a genius on our hands. First day of school, this kid is doing math. 2 + 2 = 4, the little boy says. He says, let's call the teacher. I mean, let's thank her for the work that she's done with our kid even on the first day. And then the little boy looks at his daddy and says, Daddy, what's a 2? He's spouting something, but he doesn't understand the nature of it is. And I think we do that with faith. Some of us may say, well, what's a faith? Well, the Bible is very clear about what faith is. Here in Hebrews 11:1, look at this definition. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for. Grab that word, okay? And it is the conviction of things not seen. Latch onto those two words, assurance and conviction, because this is the nature of faith for you and me. Everything starts with right belief. Right belief leads to right motivation, which leads to right action. So as we think about the nature of faith, the Bible is saying here that it is based upon this deep-seated assurance and conviction, this belief that I have. And you say, okay, well, but based upon what? Based upon the Word of God. It is assurance and conviction based upon what God has said in His Word. So we look at principles of living in God's Word, and we have this assurance and conviction that they work. We look at the promises in God's Word, and we have the assurance and the conviction that they will come to pass because God has promised them in His Word. We look at the warnings of Scripture. And we say to ourselves, I have the assurance and the conviction that those warnings come from God to me for my best interest. And those things are to be avoided because they cause harm in my life. We look at the power of His grace as illustrated in God's Word. We have the assurance and the conviction that that grace that was available to those in the Scripture is also effectual and available to me, and that I can be forgiven of my sin no matter what I've done, no matter what my past is like. It's the assurance and the conviction of that. We look in God's Word, we see His provision. Time and time again, we see God being faithful, and we have the assurance and the conviction that He can be trusted. But here's what I want to say. If you stop there, with assurance and conviction, you've stopped short of faith. Because Hebrews 11 goes on, not just defining faith, but illustrating faith. So the first part is knowing faith, right? Knowing what faith is, understanding that it's not a fleeting and passing kind of emotion, because inherently in religion, we can come and feel really good and we think that that's faith. That's not faith. Or we have this mere intellectual assent, this head knowledge about belief in God. Well, the Bible says, James the Apostle says, even the demons believe. Believing that God is who he is not the essence of faith. The second part of faith is this. It's doing faith. Faith must be put into action for it to be faith, folks. We must not only be assured and convicted of what is true, we must act upon those convictions. That's really important. So as we look here at Hebrews 11, it goes on. And I'm going to paraphrase some of this for you because it lists all these heroes of the faith. But I want you to look closely, especially if you're looking at it on your phone or in your Bible. Here's what the Bible says about the essence of faith, saying that faith is the assurance, the conviction, but then also by faith, what does it say? Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain. By faith, Enoch was commended as having pleased God. By faith, Noah, in fear, constructed an ark. By faith, Abraham obeyed. And then it goes on to talk about Sarah and Isaac and Joseph and Moses and so many other people who are heroes of the faith. And what is illustrated here by the writer of Hebrews is that it's not just knowledge, it's what you do with that knowledge. It's putting it into action. James would say also that faith without works is dead. It is of no value. It has no effect in our lives unless we put it to work. So the key component to faith, listen, is having the courage to put it to work. That's why I would say that faith is all about courage. It's about taking a risk and finding that God is faithful. So the million-dollar question is, well, how do we gain courage? Let me share with you what I think the scripture would teach us about how we gain courage based upon Hebrews 11, okay? Courage comes, first of all, by experience. And you get a whole lot of it through adversity. By experience. Now, most of us would love to have courage without the adversity. That's really not possible. If you read carefully Hebrews 11, you read the stories of all these people. Their faith was in the context of adversity. It's how faith is faith. Faith is faith when there are challenges surrounding it, which might cause us to shrink in fear, and yet instead we have faith. So courage is only manifested in adversity. It's like saying, well, I would love to be physically fit, but I don't want to work out or eat right. Well, somebody invent that pill because I'd like to have it. But it's not reality, it's wishful thinking. The same is true with faith. Courage is courage when it's in the context of adversity. You say, well, is a man brave if he's afraid? And I would say a man is only brave when he's afraid. So experiences are what builds courage, challenging experiences. And because they're challenging, those experiences turn into experience. You understand there's a difference between having experiences and gaining experience? There's a big difference between those two because not all experiences, events provide experience. Only those experiences that teach us and where we're willing to learn provide experiences. It provide experience for us. Experience is not what happens, it's what we do with what happens to us. So a man says, well, said, I have 20 years experience. No, you have one experience you've repeated 20 times because you haven't learned from your experience. Big difference. All right. Courage comes by experience. It really does, which means that we must put our faith into work to gain those experiences and to have experience. Secondly, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the will to act despite it. You've heard this before. Fear is the emotion. Fear is what you're feeling. Faith and courage is what you're doing. And here's the third thing that's true about courage. Courage is built by eliminating the gap between what you know to do and what you actually do. Folks, listen, courage does not come randomly, I think, or by accident. We're not zapped with it. We read about these heroes of faith and we put them in the category of legend and folklore. We don't see that these are real people who had successes and failures, who had ups and downs, who had victories, but also had experiences where they failed and made mistakes, and yet through those they were able to gain faith and courage. So courage, faith, doesn't come randomly or by accident. It comes over time and through practice. If someone acts with great courage, listen, you can almost be sure that there were dozens of smaller actions of courage that led up to that and gave them the capacity for more of it. It was true for the Apostle Paul. We're reading about Paul here in Acts chapter 28. Paul had been a believer now for 30 years by this time. You can read about all of his experiences and all his successes and failures. It's true for the people in Hebrews 11. Every one of them had a mixture of these successes and failures that built in them through time and through learning, through experience, a capacity for huge moments of faith and courage. It's not that they had more courage, were zapped with more courage. It's just that they had more practice of it. And that's what takes place. So what smaller acts of courage can you do every day that creates a capacity for bigger and more forms of it? What about courage in the small things? The courage to love your spouse. The courage to be kind, to be patient. The courage to control your temper. The courage to speak the truth and not lie. The courage to not cheat. The courage to act as a witness and to bear the name of Christ well. Those small things are vitally important in building the faith and courage that we are to have. See, it amazes me how people, and there are those that could attend church for 20, 30, 40 years and yet never, ever grow in their capacity for faith and never change. It's tragic. It's sad. But it has to do with understanding what the nature of faith is and by putting it into action. So when we think about these smaller acts of courage and faith, I have a little acronym that I want to share with you. This means FDPA. It means forward, different, purposeful actions. Not thoughts, not feelings, but actions. Forward, meaning I'm advancing in my faith in some way. I'm analyzing the reward of bigger faith, and I'm willing to take that risk. Different kinds of actions. A different kind of action. You've heard the saying, if you do the same things you've always done, you'll get the same results you've always gotten. That's insanity. Insanity is thinking that by doing the same things, I'm going to get different results. Do different things, you will see different things take place in your life. So a different action, but then a purposeful action, an intentional action. Not waiting for an emotion to come along before I act, but instead an act of the will. This is FDPA, and this is what we see with each one of these people in the scripture, and this is what we see with the Apostle Paul. Now, in the context of Unhindered, in the context of what we're talking about for the future of our church, let's also again today, as we've been doing every week, and you've been hanging in there with me through this, but let's today rewind the tape a little bit, because what I want to say to you that corporately as a church, this FDPA, these forward, different, purposeful actions have been consistent with who we've been as a church all along, corporately together as the body of Christ. So when we started our church in 1995 in the home, it was a forward, different, purposeful action. And then we moved to Yeager Elementary School, where we were at for 5 years, unloading a truck and trailer, setting it all up, a 1-hour worship service, tearing it all down. It was a forward, different, purposeful action. The retail center at Grant Road and Highway 249 was a forward, different, purposeful action that we as a church said, we understand the risk, but we're willing to take the risk because of the reward. And then let's stop here. In 2009, we came out here. Actually, we bought this piece of land in 2006, and we opened this building that we're in currently in 2009. Let me tell you a real quick faith story about that. So we were about 2 weeks away from signing the contract to buy this piece of land, to sign on the dotted line. And there was due a deposit and a down payment, as there normally is. And we had raised a lot of money with a small church. I don't know, we had 75, less than 100 people. And we came up and we were 2 weeks away and we were $35,000 short of that goal, of what we needed. And so we had people in the church that were like, man, you know, we're so close. Had one person in the church that said, listen, we can't give the money, but we can loan the church the money. And that just didn't set right with me or our leadership. It just seemed like a shortcut that we wanted to trust God to provide. And so the church knew where we were, and we just committed to pray and just held it loosely and said, if God wants us to have it, he will provide. Well, the following week, before the down payment was due, we had over $40,000 given. And I don't know where it came from, but I just think our people rose up in faith and committed themselves to take this forward, different, purposeful action, seeing the risk involved, but also knowing that God would be faithful to provide. That would be the reward for us, and that's exactly what happened. And we are here in this building because of people that did that. We are here because of people who would be willing to step up and step out, who would take that action of faith. And so we're in a long legacy, a long history, a long heritage of people who've taken those kinds of steps of faith. And that's what our future is all about, that we would continue to do that. Taking God-led risk. I'm not talking about being presumptuous. I'm not talking about jumping off the building and saying, God, catch us. That's pushing God's hand. That's testing God. We were willing to stop at this point. We were willing to say no. And sometimes it takes as much courage and faith to say, no, what means going forward in our faith means to say no. It means to wait. It means to stop. We were willing to do that. But God had other plans. And so God provided this for us. We were able to also, in 2012, I'm going to tell you that story next week, purchased the 6 acres of property over there. And then 2017, opened up our children's building, which has been such a blessing to our ministry. Now, again, these are locations. These are places. These are spaces. This is bricks and mortar. But what is most important is life change. We want these things for what is most important. So because of these things, God uses to create these moments. This is Geetha Utapa back then, before she got married. Geetha was from India and came to work at HP years ago. And she had a very troubling experience in her Hindu faith. And there was some superstition regarding it with her family, and she was walking away from that faith. And here's what was also very unique about Geetha, is that Geetha had an arranged marriage, an arranged engagement with a man who was a believer in India, who was a Christian already. It was very interesting. So this spurred her thoughts about Christianity, and Geetha found out about our church through a neighbor who attended our church. And she came and she sat in the back row, and she heard about the love of Christ. She came for 2 or 3 weeks, and I got to meet her after the service. She told me a little bit about her story. I said, I'd love to meet with you and talk with you. So she called and set up an appointment. She came to the church office, and we had about an hour conversation. At the end of the conversation, I was able to ask her if she wanted to put her trust in Jesus as her Savior, and she said yes, she did. And she prayed there in the office to place her trust in Jesus. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment. This is her baptism. This is the moment where publicly we celebrate life change. And so this was a great, great moment. Now, what was really cool about this is that her fiance was in India still. And her fiance was able to watch this baptism live through an iPad. While she was being baptized, he was able to witness it. And we were able to wave at him and say hello. It's really a really cool moment. So this is a real person who found real hope in the real world, and this is what we are all about, okay? So Unhindered is about this. Unhindered is our 2-year discipleship ministry initiative. I want to make sure that we understand that allows us to expand our reach, deepen our connections, and depend on Christ. So we've been in the middle of all this, and we had a great night last Wednesday night. We had what we called our advanced commitment night. You heard about it. Many of you were there. Some of you could not be there, but we had a great kickoff to the Unhindered initiative and the ability for us to fund our vision for the next 2 years. And so advanced commitment night really kick-started everything that's been taking place for us. And on that night, we had that small amount of people, a minority of those who are here at the church, who committed and pledged $2.5 million to Unhindered. And I think we just ought to thank God for that, okay? Let's thank the Lord for just that. Just a wonderful, wonderful step of faith and the ability for us to continue in our future. And we're asking you to continue to pray, okay? For all of you to pray about your part between you and God. What would God want you to do? What is that step of faith that you could do to support your church in our future of life change? And so Commitment Weekend is Thursday, November 14th, and Sunday, November 17th. Here in a couple of weeks, we'll have an opportunity for us on Sunday morning, and we're just going to have a giving party. And nobody's going to be put on the spot or pressured. That's not who we are. But we are going to come that Sunday morning, and we're going to commit ourselves to the will of God for this church. What I'd like to do is I want to ask somebody to come up right now who is going to share a story with you about her and her husband's faith adventure and how God has worked in their lives to this area of generosity. Courtney Jones has been a member of our church. Her husband Travis is one of our elders. And she has a unique story that we heard about. And we said, Courtney, would you mind reading it? And she was reluctant to do so, but she's going to come up and read this story. So let's welcome Courtney and make her feel at home.
Okay, there we go. So when I was before I came up here, I was talking to my husband and Matt in the back about therapy dogs. And like my husband's my therapy dog, and he can't be up here with me right now. So this is kind of like a little nerve-wracking. So I'm going to read my story, and I just feel like that this series that we're doing was the perfect time for me to share this story. And I just didn't think that 2 years ago that I would actually be up here sharing this with all of you. So in 2005, God blessed me with an amazing opportunity to travel, actually to work for one of the most profitable jewelers in North America. I was able to travel to some of the most beautiful places in the world, all expenses paid, ate the finest foods, stayed in 5-star hotels with an income of 6 figures. To most, this seems like the perfect setup. It was until I met Jesus. I met Jesus around 2007, and that's when the pruning started. And then in 2015, so I'm jumping from 2007 to 2015. So a lot happened between those years. In 2015, the thought came to mind of quitting to be a stay-at-home mom. Now, that just seemed impossible. First of all, I've always been so independent. To just stay at home, I was like, what am I? I'm just going to stay home. But the Lord was just working in my heart that He wanted me to be home to be a better mom, to be a better wife to my husband. So anyways, at first I joked about this to my husband and to my coworkers. It was kind of like, oh, I'm going to quit and stay at home. So my husband thought it was funny because it seemed impossible to cut our income in half. And my coworkers thought it was crazy because of how much money I was making. Well, God had other plans. It was then when the thought would not go away, and I became less and less content with my profession, and the money was no longer desirable. My heart was not in it, and I missed my family on Saturdays and most evenings. The more discontent I became, the harder I prayed and searched for answers from God. This went on for nearly 2 years until the answer came one morning before work while reading Hebrews 11, which he was just talking about Hebrews 11, so this is amazing. So it read, Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we do not see. It was all faith. That morning of March 2017, I called my husband and I said, I'm quitting Xanax. At this point, he trusted that I heard from God because I was so confident with my answer. So we talked about it, and I would pray about it every morning. I would journal about it, and I would tell him, I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to do it. And he was just kind of like, okay, because I think he also was scared, okay? So I put in my resignation and left in May of 2017. Here we are in 2019. I still have food, a home, and a car to drive. It was the best decision of my family's life. It hasn't always been easy, but God has been faithful through it all. He's taught me the lovely task of budgeting and how to be content with plenty and a little. And I've found comfort knowing He'll never leave me or forsake me. Through it all, this whole time, we've had 3 non-negotiables. 1, we will never rob God of our tithes, regardless of how much or little we have. 2, we'll never take our daughter out of Cypress Christian School. 3, we'll not stop sponsoring Maritza from Compassion International. God has sustained us through it all, and I trust Him in every part of my life. So, real quick, is it okay? Okay. So, sorry. So, the morning that I was praying, because I would go to Memorial Park every morning before work, and I would pray and just talk to the Lord, because when I would walk into that place, it's like so beautiful, everything's so consuming. It's just normal, like most of the clients are millionaires. We have billionaires who come there. So it was just so easy to get wrapped up in all of the materialism and superficialness of it all. So every morning I would pray. And this morning that I was praying, the Lord spoke clearly to me. And this was like, just hit me. It says, and without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. So He was telling me, I'm going to take care of you. You have been seeking after me. And it's not that I was leaving to go to another job to make more money. It was to stay home with my family, to take care of my husband, and to be a better mom. So I knew, because I was making the right decision, the biblical decision, that He was going to take care of us. And it's been amazing. And I just, I encourage any one of you who's struggling with faith to just step out. It could be not just faith financially, but faith just to come open. Just maybe you're holding something in, that it's type of addiction or something. Just you need to just be honest about something. I just ask that you just lay it to the Lord and just trust that He will take care of it. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Courtney. So their journey of faith might look different than yours. Their path might look different than yours. But the principle is the same for each and every one of us. What they are experiencing is what we long for everyone to experience, in whatever area that is. Folks, we don't want something from you. We want something for you. I believe that with all my heart. And for you to find that God is faithful in every area of your life, particularly the most practical ones that we tend to reserve and keep away from Him. God wants to provide for you as a father. So whatever step that is and whatever area that is, find that God will be faithful. Leads to 2 closing questions for us today. In what areas of your life do you desire more courage and faith? You look across your life and you say, well, what areas of my life are there that need to be submitted to the lordship of Christ? And it's likely an area of worry and anxiety for you. That's a good clue as to which one. Because any area that is not under the lordship of Christ, under his rulership, is an area that has the potential for worry and anxiety. So what area of life is there? And then secondly, what FDPA could you take? What forward, different, purposeful action, even if it's incremental? The way that we like to say it around here, you've heard it before. FDPA for us at the Brook is, what is your best next step? What is that? And then would you take it? So you say, okay, well, I want to be more patient. So what small areas of everyday life can you be more patient in? Can you put your faith to work? You can be aware of and cognizant of and say, okay, in this situation, my best next step with patience is this. And I begin to put it in practice, trusting God all the way. I want to be less of a worrier. All right, so in what area of your life can you have faith, practical faith, and say, I'm going to let go of control of this, and I'm going to give it to God? You say, well, I want to be more generous. Then give. Give in faith. Give in joy. You want something in your life, then take that best next step. And God will be faithful. If it's a step of faith, he will be faithful. Let's bow in prayer. Well, Father, thank you. We love you. We praise you. Thank you for who you are. And that you are the way maker, miracle worker. That is who you are, God. And help us to be the kind of people who do not just talk about faith and leave with warm feelings of faith, but the kind of people that would put it into action, God. That we would step across the threshold of faith, whatever that means. And Lord, that in every way we would trust you. Even in small ways, small steps of faith are big in your economy, God. They're big steps in your kingdom. Each and every little step, God, where people see you as the Father who provides, who is trustworthy. Lord, thank you. So we give ourselves to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.